Hey folks, this is Riker. Diablo 4 Season 7 is shaping up to be the best yet. At least if you don't mind drowning in loot. But are we getting too much of a good thing? Meanwhile, one of the fathers of Diablo has some strong words about the state of aRPGs. And he's got a point. Plus, Path of Exile players just pulled off the biggest community-driven comeback ever. EA's latest move has Bioware fans worried. And Civilization 7's early release is not looking great. Oh yeah, and Bloodborne fans, you might want to brace yourselves. We'll cover all that and more in this week's gaming news wrap-up video. But before we dive in, a quick word for this video's sponsor. You ever wish you can pull off insane air combos in an MMORPG? Well, Crystal of Atlan is about to change the game. Crystal of Atlan is a brand new Magic Punk cross-platform MMO action RPG that lets you dive into a world where magic and technology collide. As a member of the Thornbird Adventurers Guild, you'll uncover the mysteries of the legendary Crystal of Atlan, exploring breathtaking environments and taking on powerful enemy factions. Crystal of Atlan puts a strong focus on ensuring combat is buttery smooth. Every skill combo leads to a different outcome, letting you chain attacks seamlessly. And if you love flashy combat, this game lets you take fights to a whole new level, quite literally. There's an emphasis on Z-axis combat. It's a fresh take on MMORPG combat that brings a whole new layer of depth. With multiple classes available right from the start and over 20 skill combinations per class, there's plenty of room for experimentation. Plus, whether you're tackling co-op dungeons or teaming up with your guild fleet, the game's multiplayer features make it a perfect experience for those who love teaming up with friends. And the best part, you don't have to wait long to try it. Crystal of Atlan is hosting its beta test, the Precursor test, from February 18th to March 5th. Sign up now using the link in the description to be among the first to experience this Magic Punk adventure. Starting with Diablo news, Season 7 continues to be regarded as a good one, probably the best yet, with only one real criticism: loot is too plentiful, for some players at least. I think Torment 4 root holds are the most glaring example of this. So much stuff drops that my reaction isn't, oh sweet, look at all this loot, it's, ugh, I have to sift through all this crap to try to see if there's anything worth picking up, because there's multiple inventories worth of stuff on the screen and I'm not going to make a million trips back to town interrupting my gameplay this much. Now, root holds are a nice addition to the game, don't get me wrong, and hopefully they can even be added in permanently somehow. Either their mechanics can get inserted into nightmare dungeons, or maybe they could even stay in as some kind of very, very rare dungeon, sort of like the Greed Realm in Diablo 3. This would also allow the insane amount of loot we get in root holds to be okay, since it's a rare treat to discover as opposed to something quite farmable the way it is now in Season 7. Headhunts as well are a nice addition to the game. If those can't remain permanent, maybe Helltides can borrow some learnings from them. Season 7 ends on April 15th, so you still have plenty of time to do everything you want to do. The game is easier than ever. Even leveling alts will be easy because thanks to the season theme, you'll be getting a ton of whisper caches, and you can just save those caches. Don't open them. Save them, go on your alt, and then open them. And you can fully level an alt just from whisper caches because you get a bunch of XP. Then for Season Journey Completionists, the hidden title that you get for completing every objective on the final tab of the Season Journey is the prefix The Covens and the suffix Agent. Now, David Brevik, one of the fathers of Diablo and the aRPG genre, expressed recently on the Video Gamer podcast that he dislikes the kind of speed meta that the genre has evolved into. He said, quote, "I think that aRPGs in general have started to lean into this kill swaths of enemies all over the place extremely quickly. Your build is killing all sorts of stuff, so you can get more drops, so you can level up, and the screen is littered with stuff you don't care about." Sound familiar? He goes on to say, quote, "I don't find that as kind of personal and realistic as like Diablo 2. The pacing in Diablo 2 I think is great. It's one of the reasons it's endured. I just don't find killing screenfuls of things instantly and mowing stuff down and walking around the level and killing everything very enticing. I just don't feel like that is a cool experience. I find it kind of silly. I think that MMOs have definitely pushed in that direction. How fast can you level? How fast can you kill everything? It's all about speed and things like that, but in reality, I just think that makes a kind of a worse experience, and I tend to shy away from that direction. Now, of course, one can point out that Diablo 2 Endgame would devolve into killing screens of enemies. That's what Bale runs were, that's what cow level runs were. But I guess maybe the point here is that that was the end goal, to reach the point where you are strong enough to do that. Whereas now it seems it's kind of just a given that you're already that powerful very early on in your journey in modern aRPGs. He went on to talk about how the fun in RPGs of any kind isn't actually getting to the end, it's the journey to that point. End quote. When you're shortening that journey and making it kind of ridiculous, you've cheapened the entire experience, in my opinion. And I agree with David Brevik. The fun in an ARPG, to me, has always been in the journey. That's why I don't want that journey to be over too quickly. I want to savor it. I remember installing a drop mod in Diablo 2 that made unique items pop out of every chest and every monster kill, and it was insanely fun to have that much loot dropping for like 30 minutes. Then the novelty of getting literally every item I ever wanted wore off, and I got bored. And now playing a root hold in Diablo 4 Season 7 feels exactly like that. It feels like playing Diablo 3's test servers with the increased drop rates. Just legendary items raining from the sky constantly, to the point that I'm ignoring most of them. And again, it's fun at first to get all that crazy dopamine hits, until it's too much. Throughout Diablo 4's life, I have consistently not advocated for faster leveling or easier access to mythics, or generally things that shorten the journey of the game. And I know people have always replied with, well, of course you're going to say that, Riker. You play a ton more than we do, and you already have reached level 100, and you got your mythics. And one thing I need everyone to understand here, this is not at all about, I got mine, so screw you guys. If you compare me to other streamers, I'm a very casual player. Sure, I'm not casual compared to someone who plays a couple hours a week, but when I was saying I don't want it to be easier to reach level 100, I had a total of 0 level 100 characters. When I was saying I don't want it to be easier to get a mythic, I had found a total of 0 mythic items. And I was okay with that. I was okay with not having found a mythic yet, or not reaching level 100 yet, because it gave me stuff to look forward to. It made the journey still there for me, something to arrive at eventually, and it meant that the season where I would finally find a mythic, that would be the most memorable moment of the game for me. But that's fine. I understand that I'm in the minority here, and most players seem to want to get all of their goals accomplished within a reasonable amount of time in the season. They get their mythics and they get their max level, and get that done relatively quickly so that they can then move on to other games and then come back next season and start it over. I get that, and that's okay. And while I haven't been advocating for making things easier and faster level up and get things, I also have not fought against it being easier and faster, because I know that's what people want. But I do implore people to think, if we're going to continue to see a trend of things getting faster and easier and faster and easier, because that's what power creep does over time. Every game gets faster and easier over time. It's just a question of how quickly. And we've gone to like Diablo 3 levels within like a year of D4's release. So again, while you may like it now, how fast and how much loot is dropping, at what point is it going to become so fast and so easy that it's no longer fun for you? At what point does the chocolate cake become too sweet that you can't have more than a couple of bites before you get sick of it? Now, that aside, we saw the kickoff of the Lunar New Year event this week. It'll run until February 18th, and there are some free cosmetics to earn, as well as materials like a bristle and a spark. If you want to speedrun it, you can get the whole thing done in about 3 hours, and once done, there is a final reward that you can keep earning and cashing in repeatedly. Altogether, this event is a good way to farm legendary runes, which are a lot more rare this season. In fact, it's kind of easier to get respondent sparks than legendary runes. Balance is a little off there. Now, I hear one of the best strategies actually for farming the lunar event is to farm the Deserted Underpass and the Sirico Caverns nightmare dungeons, because they're filled with tons of those little spiders, letting you really rack up the kill count while under the effects of the lunar shrines. Now, technically, you can't just run these as normal dungeons, but if you do them as nightmare dungeons, then you're also getting masterworking materials. Root holds are also rewarding to run for these. You always find a shrine in a root hole, so basically you want to, as much as possible, delay killing monsters until you find the shrine. You're going to get to the big open area, then just run past monsters, find the shrine, click it, then go back and kill everything. Overall, the lunar event this year is probably the most competently executed event in the game yet. Maybe not exciting, but it's rewarding and it's not unpleasant to participate in. It is nicely tied into your typical gameplay loop, and it enhances the experience, and it can be completed in a reasonable amount of time. Maybe the only criticism is that they didn't add any Spiritborn cosmetics. I'm kind of surprised about that. They pretty much just brought back the old ones from last year. The event does, however, once again highlight how conduit shrines are still terrible. By the way, if you run into a shrine in the open world and it's a conduit, then you can try re-instancing to get it to change to a different shrine. Just portal to town, then back, and you may end up in a different instance. Now, one weird thing I've noticed since the event started, sometimes portals that spawn goblins, and this is anywhere in the game that a goblin can spawn, sometimes those goblin portals are purple now instead of the traditional gold. And no one seems to have found an explanation for this. But it's definitely happening. I've seen it myself. Lots of other people have seen it. Now, is this a bug? Is it a teaser for something new coming? Because I'll be sick if this is the start of some kind of like long-term teaser event. I don't want to get my hopes up here, but who knows? Do these purple portal goblins maybe drop different stuff? No one has suggested that yet, or no one has reported any findings yet. Is this Blizzard just messing with us? Seeing what our speculation is? Again, who knows? No, seriously, who knows? Where can we find them and ask them? Now, along with the Lunar event, we also got a nice patch this week that added yet more quality of life features, as well as some bug fixes. Tormented bosses like Varshan and Beast of Ice no longer spawn on their altars, making repeated farming easier. Loot's not going to be in the way now. The Forgotten Altar spawn rate has been increased, and T4 went from 5% to 6%, meaning with the Draft of Whispers, it goes from 10% to 12%. We got a new UI element to track headhunt progress. We got more ravens added in headhunt zones to allow for more convenient whisper turn-ins. We got a new button added to easily delete loadouts, although the armory was temporarily taken down this week due to a bug, but it's back up as of yesterday. They also reactivated the Decay Augmentation Witchcraft, which was disabled due to an exploit. They've also fixed the Barbarian's Mantle of the Mountain's Fury so that it can once again be used in Hoda Earthquake builds. Still no fix for the Necromancer's Ring of Mendeln, sadly though. This week also introduced a weird bug for some players where they log in and colors are all like weirdly vivid. Seems there was a problem with HDR, and toggling different visual settings was a way of fixing it. Some people were experiencing bugs with mythic caches turning up empty. Another weird thing that is either a bug or a bizarre choice, the wheel menu started defaulting to a different page, throwing off everyone's shortcuts for like Exit Dungeon, for instance. And on the topic of all these bugs, Adam Fletcher has posted to Twitter saying, quote, "Quality of releases has been a big topic and something the team is acutely aware they need to be better at. It won't be overnight, but it's one of the big things a lot of focus will be on." I definitely applaud the team for being so quick and reactive to patching the bugs this season, but many players are rightfully pointing out that there should not be so many bugs to begin with. So it sounds like this is something that the team is going to prioritize moving forward. In Path of Exile news, after the terrible news of the next Path of Exile 1 League was delayed indefinitely in order to support Path of Exile 2, and the community pulled the biggest fit ever, GGG announced an exciting upcoming event for PoE 1 that has won most players back. During the 1 month event, the 19 Ascendancy classes are being replaced with an entire different set of experimental 19 Ascendancies. Just wacky ideas that never quite made it off the brainstorming board, as they say. No date has yet been revealed for when this event begins, but they did begin teasing some of the Ascendancies, and they sure are out there. This has the potential to be possibly the most interesting event yet, and some players are already asking for it to be extended into an entire league. However, it should be noted that GGG said that they were starting with this 1 month event, suggesting that there will be more events beyond this, or at least more something beyond this. So maybe we don't need it to be a whole league if we're going to get multiple events. Now, this event itself is named Legacy of Frisia, named after Emperor Izaro Frisius, because the Path of Exile subreddit was overtaken by an Izaro meme started by user Jagov as a sort of hunger strike type thing. And I think Pox's league filling up to 20,000 capacity pretty much instantly also helped sway GGG, who reached out to Pox and added another 10,000 capacity to his private league server free of charge. GGG even considered turning his event into an event for everyone to join, like an officially sponsored event, but because the league had already started, they couldn't do so easily without breaking the league. The community had been quite clear. They didn't need some big new extravagant league, they just wanted something. Anything, even a reboot of an old league. They love the game, and they just want a reason to play again. When GGG basically said that nothing would happen in PoE 1 for months more, it was devastating to fans. It felt like the game was being abandoned. Chris Wilson himself had said in the past if they didn't have leagues, they would have dropped down to below 10,000 players over time and have no way of really getting anyone back. PoE fans did not want to see their favorite game die. Now, of course, it calls into question the statement that it was not possible to take talent off of PoE 2 to create the next PoE 1 expansion. But remember, this event is not an expansion and does not need as much manpower to work on it. The PoE community proved to GGG that it is still worth it for them to divert at least a little bit of resources, a little bit of manpower from PoE 2 to keep PoE alive in the meantime. And I'm glad the story has a happy ending, and I'm willing to bet that a lot of new PoE 2 players are going to be trying PoE 1 for the first time when this event starts. And speaking of PoE 2, we got some PoE 2 news as well. We got a new patch this week which adds some quality of life features. For one, mini-map icons for League mechanics now remain visible regardless of how far away you travel from them. We literally brought this up in last week's video. Obviously they're not doing it in response to that, but it's a nice coincidence. Just talked about this and boom, it's in the game. They also added a /reset atlas command to reset your atlas if it's in a bricked state. Minions can now briefly squeeze through smaller gaps if they fail to move for a short period. This, combined with a previous update of minions spawning instantly if they fall out of range, is a huge quality of life improvement for minion builds. They've also added up to 5 respawn attempts for various more endgame challenges, not maps though, and they've added more checkpoints to maps, while also improving the placement of some checkpoints. I do feel that the checkpoints are a temporary solution, and I hope they don't put too much effort into making them a permanent one. I'd rather see map layouts improved to reduce the need for checkpoints altogether. I'm very much a fix the problem, don't put a band-aid kind of guy. Oh, and the map stash tab is almost finished, but requires a bit more work before they add it in. Fingers crossed it'll be soon. Then we also got a State of Early Access update post from GGG in which they discussed all the changes made since launch 10 weeks ago. In this post, they laid out what they believe to be the biggest issues the game has that cannot be solved without a major update, which includes major balance issues with many player skills and builds, not enough character build options, including build-defining uniques, endgame progression balance is off, and not enough cool things to find in endgame. So these are things that we can expect to be improved in patch 0.2.0, but there's no timeline on that yet. Their general plan, however, was to release a major content update for PoE 2 every few months. Outside of what they highlighted, is there anything else you would like to see improved for the next patch? Sound off in the comments. I want the Huntress added, please. I kid, they can take their time with that. But add Huntress, though. Then in some Bioware news, journalist Jason Schreier confirmed that after the recent job cuts and reassignments, there remain fewer than 100 people working at Bioware. 2 years ago, there were more than 200. The team that remains is working on the next Mass Effect, led by veterans who oversaw the original trilogy, as well as Anthem. Now, originally, talent from Bioware was being assigned on a temporary basis to help out with projects at other EA subsidiaries, but these employees were recently informed that these reassignments were permanent, and they were no longer employees of Bioware. And if they wanted to work at Bioware again, they'd have to look for a job opening and apply. Meanwhile, during EA's Q3 2025 earnings call, EA CEO Andrew Wilson suggested that Dragon Age The Veilguard may have reached a wider audience if it had shared world features and deeper engagement. And lots of people are interpreting this to mean if they had made it a live service game, which originally at some point it was going to be during one of its phases of development. And this certainly does not bode well for the next Mass Effect if this is how EA feels. Meanwhile, Michael Dowse, the head of publishing of Larian Studios, the developers of Baldur's Gate 3, he's criticized EA on Twitter about all the layoffs, talking about the loss of institutional knowledge in an effort to trim fat. He said, quote, "I'd understand if they were pumping out hit after hit. Perhaps you can argue that strategy's working. But clearly the aggressive streamlining, i.e. layoffs, isn't working. It's nothing but cost cutting in the most brutal sense. It's always people lower down the food chain that suffer when it's clearly strategy higher up the food chain that's causing the problem. On a pirate ship, they'd toss the captain overboard. Video game companies should be run like pirate ships. To make it absolutely clear, what I hate about the way layoffs are carried out is that they are done before decision makers know what to do with the studio, and not as a result of figuring out a direction. This is consistently true. It is a short-term cost-saving measure at a huge human expense that doesn't solve a long-term problem, i.e. a lack of a viable strategic direction defined at an executive level. You can probably figure it out if you trust your developers instead of firing them. Meanwhile, while EA is suggesting single-player RPGs are not what people want, single-player RPG Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 released this week, and it turned a profit in a single day. Within 24 hours, the game reached 1 million sales. On Steam, it has very positive reviews, 91% of them are positive. On OpenCritic, it has a top critic average score of 89 out of 100, with 96% of critics recommending the game. It seems the devs addressed most of the criticisms from the first game, with the main annoyance amongst players being their adherence to a cumbersome save system that a lot of players modded out of the first game. And not all players enjoy the emphasis on immersion and simulation. I mean, to some extent, but the overemphasis, one can say, to the point of needing to eat regularly without overeating, needing to sleep, how long it takes to craft things. And of course, there are some bugs, but nowhere close to the jankiness of the first game. And the performance on PC is reportedly excellent, super well optimized for even lower end systems, and overall the game seems to be everything that people loved about the first, but done even better. Now, while Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 did make back its entire budget in 24 hours, just imagine if it had been a live service game with a shared world and microtransactions, how much more money it definitely would have made. If only EA was in charge of this game, think of how much better it could have been. Then in some Steam news, Valve has added a new feature that will warn customers about early access games that have not received updates in over a year. Another win by Valve, although I suspect this may just lead to a meta of devs pushing out tiny, insignificant patches just to reset the timer on this automated system. But nonetheless, this is a great move by Valve towards protecting customers. Man, I remember when Steam first came out, a lot of us hated it. We resented being forced to install Steam just to play Counter-Strike or Half-Life 2. It was basically just a DRM tool and little more. Now, it's like the most consumer-friendly platform for gamers out there. And it does make me wonder how much of this is thanks to Valve being a private company and therefore not needing to answer to public shareholders. They don't need to show ever-growing profits year after year after year. Then in some Bloodborne news, no, don't get your hopes up, it's not good news. Or is it? I guess you can spin it that way. Lance McDonald, the creator of the 60 FPS mod for Bloodborne, posted on social media that he received a DMCA takedown notification on behalf of Sony, asking him to remove links to the mod that he made in 2021. And he has complied. Of course, the mod is still out there, tons of people have it. It'll likely live on the internet forever and still be accessible. It's just going to be a lot harder to find it. Still, this is a jerk move from Sony. His mod is not illegal, but he would have to prove that in court, and that means spending a ton of money. A ton of money that a giant company like Sony can afford to spend and make the case drag on for months and months, effectively bankrupting the modder, so it's just easier to fold when you're bullied by a big corporation. Can't blame the guy. Now to clarify, this is a mod for PlayStation, and you'd have to use a jailbroken PlayStation to run the mod. So you can make an argument about it being illegal to jailbreak a PlayStation, but it's not illegal to mod a game for personal use if that mod does not facilitate piracy or cheating or circumventing DRM. All the mod does is lift the 30 FPS cap to 60 FPS. Now you may be wondering, where's the good news in this, Riker? Well, I suppose you can perhaps read this as a sign that Sony may be working on their own 60 FPS version of the game. Like maybe a remaster? The odds are incredibly low, but hey, who knows? Then Sid Meier's Civilization 7 had its early release this week, with full release scheduled for the 11th, and things are not looking great. On OpenCritic, it has a top critic average score of 82 out of 100, with 86% of critics recommending it. Which is not bad at all, those are actually pretty good numbers. But on Steam, the game has mixed reviews from users, with only 48% of the reviews being positive. And it should be noted, the user reviews are currently coming from people who paid extra for the early launch version of the game. So these are reviews coming from the most die-hard fans most eager to play the game. And it seems a common thread amongst the user reviews is that the game has great potential, but seems rough and unfinished in its current state. While it's not exactly new for a Civ game to only reach its stride after multiple updates, this seems to be the worst launch state of a Civ game in a while. Civ 6 was in a much better state at launch by comparison. As for the critic reviews being so high, well, there seems to be actually quite a bit of inconsistency amongst them, even contradictory reviews. So it's a little hard to discern, I guess, who's right there, but IGN gave the game a 7 out of 10, with the reviewer being Lena Hafer, who is a specialist in grand strategy games, and she has described Civilization 7 as a big step backwards for the series, but it has the potential to become a great game with further patches and DLC. If you've tried the game, what are your thoughts? Sound off in the comments. And lastly, we got the release date trailer for Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. The game releases on August 28th. And that's going to wrap up this video, folks, but do be sure to check out last week's video in which we talk about the bad news that both Diablo 4 and Path of Exile players received last week. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.